A prestigious chess tournament had just wrapped up in Amsterdam in 1976. Viktor Korchnoi, one of the Soviet Union's strongest grandmasters, finished at the top, sharing first place with a young rising star, Tony Miles. But while the chessboards were being packed away and trophies handed out, something far more dramatic was unfolding behind the scenes. At the end of the tournament, Korchnoi quietly walked up to Tony Miles and asked him an unusual question. How do you spell the words political asylum? It wasn't a joke. It wasn't small talk. It was a genuine, desperate query. Moments later, armed with that knowledge, Korchnoi walked straight into a police station in Amsterdam. There, he requested political asylum, officially defecting from the Soviet Union. Why did he take such a drastic step? What drove one of the USSR's greatest chess minds to abandon his homeland, knowing he would never be welcomed back? In this video, I'll uncover the shocking story of Viktor Korchnoi's defection and the turbulent events that led him to make this life-altering decision. It is no secret that Soviets cultivated a massive chess culture. For them, chess was never just a game. It was a battlefield of intellect, a stage where they could demonstrate the superiority of Soviet intelligence to the entire world. The state took its chess heritage very seriously, often intertwining it with politics and national pride. Take the 1953 Candidates Tournament as an example. David Bronstein, one of the participants, later revealed that Soviet authorities were deeply worried about the possibility of the American grandmaster Samuel Reshevsky winning the event. To prevent this, Soviet players were allegedly instructed to throw games in favor of Vasily Smyslov, who at one point was leading the tournament. Such behind-the-scenes maneuvering showed just how seriously the Soviets viewed chess as a tool of ideological dominance. Throughout the 1960s, the Soviet Union produced a golden generation of champions: Tal, Spassky, Petrosian, Korchnoi, and the evergreen Paul Keres. Together they maintained Soviet control over the chess world. But then came Bobby Fischer. The Americans finally had a player capable of taking on the entire Soviet machine. Fischer systematically dismantled their elite, beating Petrosian, Spassky, Taimanov, Smyslov, and many others. Suddenly, the once unshakable Soviet fortress looked vulnerable. By the end of the 1960s, Soviet officials realized they lacked the depth of young talent to challenge Fischer's rise. Their veterans had already fallen one by one. What they needed was a new star, a fresh face who could stand up to the American prodigy and restore Soviet dominance. And then, in the early 1970s, they found one. In 1972, when Bobby Fischer captured the World Championship in Reykjavik, he didn't go on to defend his crown. Instead, he vanished into seclusion, leaving the chess world in uncertainty. His chances of returning for the next title match looked increasingly bleak. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union had already found their new standard-bearer, Anatoly Karpov. Young, fresh, immensely talented, and, most importantly, politically reliable, Karpov was everything the Soviet chess establishment could have hoped for. By contrast, Viktor Korchnoi was the complete opposite. A brilliant player, yes, but stubborn, outspoken, and unwilling to blindly follow the party line. He openly criticized the Soviets' practice of sending KGB agents to monitor players at international tournaments, an act of defiance that only deepened the rift between him and the authorities. In the 1974 candidates cycle, Korchnoi faced former world champion Tigran Petrosian in the semifinals. They had entered the match as friends, but they would leave as bitter enemies. Originally scheduled for Moscow, the match became a battleground before the first move was played. Korchnoi refused to compete there, arguing it was unfair for Petrosian to enjoy the comforts of his home, while he would be forced to endure a shabby hotel. The venue was shifted to Odessa, but tensions only grew worse. On the board, Korchnoi won convincingly, 3.5 to 1.5. Off the board, the friendship was destroyed. Petrosian accused Korchnoi of muttering during the games, while Korchnoi shot back that Petrosian deliberately shook his legs under the table to distract him. What had begun as sport had turned into open warfare. That set the stage for the candidates' final, Karpov versus Korchnoi. For Karpov, the Soviet machine rolled into full support. For Korchnoi, it was another uphill struggle. Once again, he requested that the match not be played in Moscow, knowing the venue favored his rival. But this time, his demand was flatly denied. Then came another controversy. Karpov insisted the games should begin at 5 p.m., 30 minutes later than the traditional 4:30 start. To Korchnoi, this was no small matter. He believed the delay was designed to tire him out, the older man, as the games dragged deeper into the night. Even the press and television protested Karpov's demand, since later hours made their coverage more difficult. The issue was debated at a meeting of the organizing committee. According to Korchnoi, many officials supported his side with strong arguments, but the decisive voice came from the only chess player present, Yuri Averbakh, president of the USSR Chess Federation. Averbakh sided with Karpov. The proposal was accepted. Korchnoi was furious. He later wrote, "I had to make some reply, if only in the way of psychological preparation for the match. Otherwise, if I had submitted, I would have lost it without a fight." So he chose a bold gesture. He sent Averbakh a postcard addressed to the USSR Central Chess Club, ensuring it would likely be read by many before reaching its target. Knowing Averbach's tall stature, he wrote with venom, "From cowardice to treachery is but one step. But with your attributes, you will easily accomplish it. Sail skillfully with the wind and you'll be all right." He signed it in large, unmistakable letters. With that, he gained another enemy within the Soviet system. But by then, he no longer cared. As he put it himself, "From this point, I was playing for a breakout." From here on, life would only grow more difficult for Viktor Korchnoi. The USSR had thrown its full weight behind Anatoly Karpov in this match. Korchnoi later reflected on the imbalance with striking clarity. He was a typical representative of the working class, the rulers of the country, according to the Soviet constitution, whereas I had spent my life in the cultural center of Leningrad, and was contrasted to him as a representative of the intelligentsia. Besides, Karpov was younger and more promising. The future was his, whereas I would not be playing much longer. Karpov was showered with endearments, and he had become a member of the Central Committee of the USSR Communist Youth Organization, the chairman of which was his friend. Korchnoi had the support of his trusted second, Vyacheslav Osnos, but needed additional help for the match. He brought in international master Zhinjikashvili. Yet even here, the Soviets applied pressure. According to Korchnoi, attempts were made to re-educate Zhinjikashvili, creating an atmosphere of distrust between him and his own second. Karpov, on the other hand, enjoyed a dream team of support. Petrosian, Averbach, Tal, and even Botvinnik himself. It was the old guard of Soviet chess rallying behind their new chosen star. The match was fought bitterly across 24 games, with Karpov only just edging out Korchnoi 12.5 to 11.5. Afterwards, Korchnoi remarked with conviction that had the format been an unlimited match, Karpov would eventually have cracked. Despite the loss, Korchnoi still found time to pay tribute to Bobby Fischer, calling him the best player of this generation. But for the Soviet establishment, Korchnoi's resistance had crossed the line. His defiance, his criticisms, his open praise of Fischer, it was too much. The hammer came down. Korchnoi was expelled from the USSR national team, banned from international tournaments for a year, silenced from writing chess articles, and even forbidden from receiving mail from abroad. It was clear the authorities wanted to crush him into submission. Yet Korchnoi was not a man who could be silenced. While the Soviets tried to box him in, he began quietly planning his escape. In 1975, after his ban was lifted, he managed to smuggle out his prized chess library while competing in Hastings. And finally, in 1976, after winning a tournament in Amsterdam, Viktor Korchnoi made his move. He defected, seeking temporary asylum in the Netherlands before settling in Switzerland. This was the ultimate break from the Soviet chess empire. From here, Korchnoi would become both an outcast and a warrior, standing alone against the full might of the USSR, and soon challenging Anatoly Karpov not once, but twice, for the greatest prize in chess. We will cover a part 2 of this story in future, where we cover Korchnoi's dramatic life in exile and his legendary World Championship battles against Karpov. Matches filled with politics, psychology, and controversy, unlike anything chess has ever seen.